What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here, joined by Emory Hunt, CBS Sports. Everything you want to know about the game of football, this man knows. Emory, how are you, man?
I'm doing fine, Aaron, man. It's always a pleasure to jump on with a good old friend,
Now,
my
good
guy.
old friend. We've known each other a long time, man. I was just
Right.
thinking about this the other day. I was at Lily's, I think, on 17th Street here in New York, and I remember meeting you there and having talks about potentially working together that didn't come to fruition, but that was a long time ago, man. We've been hanging out here in the New York area for quite some time.
I know, man. It's been fun, man. I just love the fact that we've both been around the game to see it, see the ebbs and flows and, how it has transitioned from what we used to talk about to what we're seeing people do now.
Yeah, it's great, and I'll obviously be linking to a bunch of your work in the description of this video. People, check out Emery's stuff. He is an absolute legend, and it does seem like I talk to you once a year, a couple weeks before the draft. I want to get your perspective on maybe some guys that aren't garnering a lot of headlines and or maybe potential day 3 selections. Although maybe we might work into day 2 at times, but it seems like because you do so much work around the game and you are kind of a man who really dives into all levels of football, I love talking to you every year about, maybe some of the guys who you haven't heard 100 times already by this point of the draft process, right? But we'll start kind of 30,000 feet looking at the Packers' needs, right? There's a long tradition in Green Bay of finding offensive linemen later in the draft who end up being long-term starters. That's something they're known for, something they've done very well. And I suspect it's probably something we'll see them do again this draft, although you never really know. The one thing that I'm wondering, though, is there's been a lot of talk about the offensive tackle depth, right? And even some of the depth along the interior when it comes to, you know, Green Bay liking guys who are versatile, guys who can play up and down the line. Is there enough depth, do you think, as far as tackles that maybe aren't day 1 guys, but who are going to be viable starters later on day 2 and into day 3? Because man, the headline of this draft seems to be there are offensive tackles, premium offensive tackles basically on offer for days.
Yeah, listen, and that's why I love putting together the draft guide every year, because it's a situation where you kind of go past the. I mean, unless you want to talk one more time about Malik Neighbors, you kind of go past the
Right.
the same 9 players, right?
Mhm.
And you see where because we know this too, and I think folks really need to understand 90% of an NFL roster is rotational depth guys, starter guys, right?
Mm.
Kind of glue guys. 10% are superstars. So not everyone can be a superstar. The league is made up of solid players, right?
Right.
And so it promotes the 10%, but the 90% is just solid and guys that rotate in and out. And when you look at the depth of a class, I feel like it's always a great year to really beef up the middle. The middle is always fat, and you want to keep that middle fat. And that's what we're seeing now every year, especially if you go deep in the draft like I do, you'll see guys that, and I've always had this philosophy where, I don't look at, okay, my first round pick is a starter, my second round pick is a starter. I look at it from a big picture perspective, like, wow, there's 10,000 eligible, prospects every class. I get 7 opportunities to find 7 good players out of 10,000. Give me those opportunities. So even if I grab a guy in the 7th round, I'm still envisioning him playing significantly for my football team. And I
Right.
feel like if people take that approach, you could find talent all throughout the draft and even after the draft.
Well, that's what I'm really glad you said that because it is kind of funny now with the modern setup of the draft where we have night 1, it's very prime time driven. You get done with that first night and people are making content and it's winners and losers and who won the first round. It's like, hey, there are 6 more rounds, my guys. And then 2, it's like I'm very happy for all the guys who get selected on night 1, but we all know that's no guarantee that they amount to anything, let
Right.
alone become long-term starters or become a kind of fixture of whatever program they end up in. So that's why I love talking to you every year because those are the guys, the day 2 and 3 who do supplement, your roster with like basically I want to put too fine a point on it, but cheap labor, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got guys under contract for 4 years, minimum rookie deals. for a lot of them, man, this is how you build the guts of your roster. So, yeah, it's something that seems to get lost in the hype of the draft, especially the closer we get to it, and then when the draft actually occurs that first night, especially, people tend to forget. Yeah, wait, those contributors are coming on these other 2 days.
I mean, look at the Packers receiving core, right? How many times
Perfect
have we
point.
they get great talent after round one
Mhm.
consistently. They have a type, they know what to look for, and they go and grab it. And I always bring up the Rams. This will be the first time the Rams have a first round pick since they moved to LA, I believe, right? The last
Right.
time we saw them pick in the first round was Jared Goff as they just got to LA, right? So the reason why is that they was using that first round pick to go out and get known assets from other teams and
Mhm.
say, hey, we can do this because we know our scouts are great. We can find guys on day 3 and undrafted rookie free agents that can come in and start. Last year, their entire secondary was 4th through 6th round picks. So, yes, you can have talent everywhere, and it's about having a process, having an understanding. I feel like Green Bay definitely understands that, which is why we've seen them constantly have talent. You're never going to see a Green Bay roster and say, they don't have talent. Like, nah, they may be missing a key piece here or there. The quarterback play may be inconsistent, but that roster has always had talent because they know what to look for. They have a process and they execute it flawlessly.
I'm glad you brought up the Rams because I think that's something that kind of flew under the radar when they won the Super Bowl because of the fact that they did go out and, like you indicated, they traded for some marquee players, right? And they brought in marquee guys in free agency. But what people tend to forget about that team was they, along with the Packers that year, had one of the youngest rosters and a roster that was filled with guys who've only ever been in their program, like
Right.
more so than like the majority of the NFL. So, yes, they made a lot of headlines with their roster construction that year, but they knew the guts of their program was built through the draft, has to be built through the draft. And I think, yes, there's no doubt that the Packers will continue to do that. With that's how they've built, their program for decades now. Looking at, say, like, let's say day 3, like day 3, late round, even undrafted guys, are there any kind of offensive linemen that you think, okay, there's a decent chance that, there's a guy or two that are going to slide down there, but could potentially contribute, maybe not even right away, but eventually in a program?
Listen, there's two, and there's a bunch, obviously, but there's two guys that stick out to me from Marshall. One is Dalton Tucker. He's a guard, and he's just super athletic. And you watch Marshall play; they run the football rather well. East and West, they do a great job there. And then his teammate Ethan Driscoll, the tackle, is another long, athletic guy that can move. Um, Driscoll was in the Senior Bowl and watching him, and watching these guys on film, it's like, wow, like they really can get out and about. Like they are pulling
Right.
left, pulling right, and they're connecting accurately. Now, granted, um, you know, Driscoll has not Driscoll, the Tucker has he has a little bit of over aggressiveness, but I'd rather rein that in than have to tell him, hey, you need to be aggressive. Like I'd
Right.
rather you be aggressive and rein it in as opposed to having to try to start the ignition and get you to go, right?
Right.
But these two dudes are really good pass pro and also in the run game. And there's a small school guy that listen. The first All Star game I went to this cycle is always in December. It's the FCS Bowl. It's the second week of December, right? It's down in Daytona Beach.
Hmm.
So I'm sitting there and I'm watching O line D line 101s, and this O lineman is wearing number 98. I'm like, why is he wearing 98? So now, like, I am fixated on is it a
Right.
defensive lineman making a transition? Like, what?
Right.
Why has he got 98 on? And so, and I couldn't really recognize the helmet. So I get back to the room and I'm looking up, okay, Mars Hill, defensive lineman, and it's like, no, the offensive lineman. I was like, oh wow, this dude won the Jacobs Blocking Award, which is the top offensive lineman in the state of South Carolina, and he won it for the Division II, player. And so at Mars Hill, he played right tackle, and this dude was dominating. I'm talking about just kicking dudes' ass all throughout the film, up and down the film. He measured in at 6'2", 315 at the FCS Bowl. I'm like, wow, this dude against FCS competition
Right.
was holding his own as a tackle, but obviously he's going to kick down at guard. After practice, the 2 days I was there, you saw many scouts talk to him as soon as practice was over with. And by the time he was done interviewing with teams, he was the last guy to get back onto the bus to for the other team to come out. And I was like, wow, this dude is just dominant. Then when I get to go watch his film and grade it like with a fine tooth comb in February, just like, man, this dude really is good. 3-time first team all conference, AFCA first team Division II All American. I was like, somebody's gonna get themselves a steal here
Mhm.
with this dude. And that's just the one small college lineman that really just jumped out at me over the course of this whole, grading process.
It sounds like the perfect Packers pick. It's what they love to do, right? Take those off athletic tackles and kick them inside and make them play guard, and they're pulling and becoming great players for like 10 plus years.
Leandre Andreas is his name. I don't know if I talked about, but I didn't mention his
Nice.
name. Leandre Andreas.
Andreas. Well, that's someone we're going to have to make sure we look up prior to the draft, and I'll be ready on day 3 as I sit there watching the 7th round play out. Emory, I don't know, man. When I was a younger man, I was all gung ho about we're going to be streaming all 3 days of the draft, all 7 rounds. Now we get to like round 5, and I'm like, Brian, can you just trade away all these picks? I don't need to be sitting here watching you draft like dudes who are going to be battling for a spot in August. Like, I don't know. I guess that's what age does to you. But let's look on the other side of the ball for a second and look at safety, because that's a spot where the Packers clearly have a need. They did draft Anthony Johnson Jr. last year in the 7th round, pretty inconsistent in his rookie season, although, he was making a pretty significant jump, came to safety late in college. Um, I know he was being asked to do a lot of different things than what he had been asked to do at the college level, but I got to suspect the Packers will have their eye on a safety or two. From what I've been told and from what I can garner, it's not an incredibly deep safety class. It's not a class that you're going to write home about, so to speak. But I got to suspect there might be a guy or two who, you get down there in day 3, there might be a guy who's worth taking a flyer on.
Listen, people got to stop talking about the same 9 players because they'll throw if they don't
That's
see.
why I come talk to you, man.
Yeah, listen, if they don't see 5 Ed Reeds here, oh, this safety classes, they want easy work. Now you gotta put that hard hat on and get the shoveling, right? But and you know this, Aaron, I grade safeties differently, like because of how the game has grown. We used to know it as free safety and strong safety, but
Right.
now because of how the game is, you kind of break that off into combo safety. So it's kind of a cross because you want to be able to stop the run. So you got a safety down in the box and down in the alley to help you be better against the run, but you also want somebody that can cover, i.e., the safety. So this is like a third safety that we see now a lot in the
Yeah.
NFL. Thomas Harper of Notre Dame is my number 1 combo safety this year. 5'10", about 190, can cover, can blitz off the short corner, gives you some good ability to the outside run, but also can match up against some of these bigger wide receivers as well. And then when you look at someone like Sanosu Kane out of Purdue, listen, and he is a strong safety, but he has so much twitch and able to bounce around and match up versus tight ends and cover backs down the wheel, down the rail, and everything like that. So he's
Mhm.
he's fantastic in coverage, despite being a strong safety. So there's a lot of those type guys, right? Malik Mustafa out of Wake Forest. Rarely do you see someone. Now he's a strong safety too, but man, he is super athletic. You see someone go from deep third and then get in the backfield behind the line of scrimmage and make a play. That's
There you
how
go.
explosive he has been sometimes in terms of seeing it and then going. Jalen Simpson is my number 1 free safety from the classic form because he is someone I feel like shows the most discipline in coverage. In terms of like, hey, stay deeper than the deepest before you break on the ball. He does that consistently. He's got good athleticism. Sean Preston out of Mississippi State is another one that's really good. And even though I have this guy graded as a slot corner, his teammate Marcus Banks was a safety at Mississippi State, but he can also play down and cover because he showed it at the College Gridiron Showcase where, okay, I'm gonna get out there on a wide out and cover him one-on-one. He was holding his own, but with starter safety background, now you combine the 2 positions, and that's somebody that could play in today's NFL because he can fly between different parts of the back end and keep you flexible on game day.
And that's what the key is, especially with Halfley coming in, a new defensive scheme, and what he had talked about in his introductory press conference as far as what he's looking for. Now, obviously, they went out and got McKinney, star
Mhm.
free agency, no doubt
Great.
about it. but you want somebody who you can at least not just compliment McKinney with, but somebody who can be flexible, someone who can do lots of different things because you don't want to make it easy on the offensive coordinator. And oh, I know where he's going to be. I know what type of covers I like to run when they do that, etc. Um, and then that brings me to kind of up one level, so to speak, on the defensive side of the ball at linebacker. I got to suspect switching to a 4-3, the Packers are going to most likely move Quay Walker to the will.
Mhm.
They are in desperate need of a Mike, though. I mean, you look at what they have on hand, it's not pretty. I think Isaiah McDuffie has been a good player. I can't imagine they want to count on him as their starter in the middle of a 4-3 defense. I know we've read a lot and heard a lot about Edrin Cooper, maybe Wilson. Those guys are well covered. But is there anybody possibly down the line, so to speak, where okay, this guy might be able to come in and man the middle of your defense? Because I suspect they're gonna utilize a lot of different bodies. They'll mix and match, and they'll probably be pretty sub heavy, right? Where packages against certain like opponent dependent, they love to button it up and run a lot of power. Well, we're gonna have a different approach, especially our linebacker group, than we would with a team that likes to spread it out, throw it around the yard. But is there somebody or a guy, maybe two, who, yeah, there's a late day 2, day 3 guy who could come in and man the middle for the Packers defense?
Late when you're thinking late in the draft, you want guys that's also gonna probably double up as special teams, right? And
Mm,
kind of help you out. Listen, there's two guys that, and they're probably undersized, but they do a fantastic job of playing the ball in coverage. It's kind of like what you want now. You know what I'm saying?
right,
You know what I'm saying? Run the ball, stopping the run is about attitude and want to.
right,
Just get to it and make a play, right? Don't be scared. But in coverage, and we're talking about day three. How about Brian Holloway of Texas State? About 5'11", 220 pounds, great hands at the position in terms of picking the ball off. And you see him drop back in coverage. You'll see him read hook the curl flat, get in the position and make a play on the ball consistently. That's someone that kind of help you stay strong in coverage on third down or whatnot, sub package type guy. Jamal Hill of Oregon. Now, here's the unique thing about him. He ran 4.4. He's 5'11", about 220. He's kind of cheating because he was a starting safety his whole
right,
career up until this past season where he moved down to linebacker. And when you have that ability to run like that with that explosive speed, that's someone can not only be a core special teamer day one, but also has upside to grow at the position because he's still a neophyte playing the position this past season at Oregon. And he is someone that's super explosive, super dynamic. But him and Brian Holloway are some day three options that I really like. You go back and watch the game. It's the bowl game, I believe, against Rice, where he had 2 pick sixes or something crazy like that. He just picking
that'll
it, and
work.
then it wasn't like 5-yard intercept return for touchdown. It was like catching it, running with a
Weaving through
blitz
traffic,
yeah, weaving through traffic, making a guy miss and then getting to
right?
the end zone twice. So that's just a fantastic part about his game. And I also saw him down at the College Gridiron Showcase too. So when you're around these different parts and watching these guys play, Lawrence Richardson out of Morgan State. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him. Explosive guy. He's a long guy, but he's not as tall as Shaq Leonard when he came out of
Mm,
South Carolina State. But Richardson, I called a lot of his games over the last 4 years at Morgan State, and he's like fast sideline to sideline. He didn't test fast, but he plays fast, and he's also someone that can play any one of the three backer spots, Will, Mike, or Sam,
there you
and
go.
be productive.
Absolutely love to hear it. Emery, I cannot thank you enough for making the time, man. Each and every year, love to take these deep dives with you onto some of the lesser known names. Years ago you were on our draft stream, but now you're all big time and on television and stuff. But if you find yourself meandering on and off time during the draft, you're more than welcome to jump on Cheesehead TV.
I might jump on via the phone and do go live as the kids say, right?
I love it. Oh man, I appreciate you so much. Take it easy, man.
Always a pleasure, my dude.